Well, hello again. Rick Weldon here, President and CEO of the Frederick County Chamber of Commerce. We're continuing our series, Chamber Conversations, Trusted Advice in Challenging Times. The best part of my job as Chamber CEO is getting to meet with all of you and to chat about your work and your families and your priorities. But since our current situation denies us that opportunity, we thought we'd come up with a new way to chat. We have some really amazing members, people with incredible expertise and knowledge on a wide range of topics that we think are important to hear, especially now. We're going to use these chamber conversations as a way to stay connected, to stay informed, and just to keep in touch with each other. Today, I'm really excited to introduce Amanda Haddaway. Amanda is the Managing Director and Lead Consultant and Trainer for HR Answerbox. Amanda has nearly 40,000 hours of experience in human resources, and she specializes in resolving difficult employee relations situations, designing and facilitating interactive training solutions, and advising small businesses on how to effectively manage their human capital. This is cool. In 2019, Amanda was recognized as the most influential woman in HR training in the USA by Acquisition International. She holds 2 of the highest professional certifications available in the human resources field, SPHR and SHRM.SCP, as well as a Master of Jurisprudence degree in Labor and Employment Law from Tulane University Law School, a master's degree from George Washington University, and a bachelor's degree from James Madison University. In addition to all of that, Amanda and HR Answerbox are the go-to resource for your Frederick County Chamber of Commerce. Trust me when I tell you, I wouldn't make a move in this field without having spoken to Amanda about it first. So it's my great pleasure to introduce you all to Amanda Haddaway. Amanda, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks, Rick. And that was a really, really kind welcome. I appreciate that. And I'm excited to have the opportunity to chat with you and all of our chamber members today.
So I should tell everybody, in interest of full disclosure, you and I have been talking about our HR issues and just in general about HR issues. And as we sort of decided on what the content would be to kind of roll this out, we started with our first episode with Shabri Moore, who talked about kind of where you might be in your small business financially right now, where some of the options, try to demystify and deconfuse some of what people are out there dealing with. Frankly, it was an easy choice for what the next content to queue up was. Everybody I talked to, everybody from Fortune 100s to mom and pop retail out here on Market Street are worried about their workforce, protecting their workforce, doing the right thing by the people that have helped them build their investment into something meaningful. So I just felt like this was a great topic, and I couldn't think of a better person to walk through this with. So if you're okay, start with maybe tossing out some questions. And these are sort of conversational. These sessions last about 15 or 20 minutes, or until we've exhausted the content. But in this one, I guess we could probably go for a couple hours. We won't, but we could. Maybe we'll do a follow-up. So now that most people, including our whole chamber team, I mean, I'm breaking the law here by being here today because it makes for a more seamless communication, but most people are working from home. What are some tips for managers who are, I'll say, attempting to lead teams during this time? Because that brings us to a whole nother conversation about how to do that right. But what are some things managers ought to be thinking about, worried about, providing for?
Yeah, it's definitely a challenging and interesting time for managers and employees alike. So my biggest tips for managers would be to communicate and over communicate, because what's happening is we're all kind of feeling disconnected. This is weird. This is uncharted territory for a lot of us, and employees want to hear from their managers on a more regular basis. We don't have the luxury of standing up from our desk, walking down the hall, and and having some of those collaborative discussions that we're used to in the traditional workplace. So managers need to make an even more concerted effort to communicate to their teams. And not everything has to be a Zoom webinar. I know that we're all feeling a little inundated with that. So pick up the phone, send them an email, figure out when it's a good time to get everyone together on a conference call or on some other type of informal chat, whether it's through video or just through audio. Doesn't matter as long as you're having those regular and disciplined checkpoints. The other thing that managers can do is be available. So we're all adjusting to new schedules, new realities. If your organization is setting core work hours, that's great. The expectation obviously is that you're going to be working during those core hours, but if your company has a little more flexibility and people are kind of fitting work in where they can, as a manager, you need to make sure that you share with your team when you're available to be pinged with questions, when you can take calls, when you can meet, etc., so that, you know, things can still move forward and that the manager isn't creating an unnecessary bottleneck to someone else's productivity. And then finally, be flexible. And that one pretty much goes without being said, just because that's the reality of how we have to be right now.
Right. No, it's all awesome advice, exactly what we knew we would hear when we ask you these questions. So the next question has to do with sort of best practices, and I'll start with ours. I don't know if it's a best practice, but it's a practice, right? So we're all just sick of Zoom, right? So we actually purchased the licensed seat version because it came with more web security. Mm-hmm. Because we were seeing what was happening with the free versions. People were easily able to hack in and manipulate and that kind of thing. But none of us like looking at each other over video and not knowing who's supposed to talk now and talking over each other. So we came up with another app. Amanda Rodriguez found this called Slack. So in addition to we still try to do twice a week, all see each other and, you know, talk through the things we need to talk through. But Slack gives us the ability to talk as a whole group. So in the morning, we all Slack between 7:30 and 8:30 with what our work plan is for the day. And then at the end of the day, around 4 o'clock, we Slack back to everybody, reply all in our Slack group. What it was we got accomplished and kind of thinking forward to the next couple of days. Then we created kind of work groups within Slack. So when I've got to talk to Kimberly and Dawn about membership, we've got a membership financial Slack that we can communicate. If it's marketing, Jen and Amanda and I can. If it's setting up these chats, Caitlin and Jen and Amanda and I can communicate. So for our little 8-person team, that seems to have worked pretty well, but it's still a little clunky, a little weird, a little odd, but it's to the extent it's working, it's working. But how about some best practices that I know you've been exposed to and some things you've seen and heard?
Yeah, so I'll echo what you said about Slack. It's a great tool. There's not really any implementation. You just sign up and can kind of create your different channels. I actually use Slack here at HR Answerbox. I have a virtual assistant, and that's where we go to collaborate and file share, and it just is a lot easier to streamline versus sending attachments back and forth through email. So I echo that. But I think, you know, we need to kind of pause and think about big picture and start thinking about where we go from here. So it's likely that in all of our businesses, myself included, and I'm sure for the chamber as well, we had goals of what we were going to set out and accomplish in 2020. And most of us have found ourselves on some other planet where all of those goals and dreams and, you know, things that we thought we were going to make happen have now really evaporated or gone into a different galaxy. So a lot of us need to go back to the drawing board, and as leaders, as managers, even as individual contributors, we need to take a hard look at what are we working working on, and what are the priorities going to be moving forward. So this may be an adjustment of goals. It's certainly going to be an adjustment of financial goals for most of
Yeah,
us, and I'm sure
right.
Shabri talked about that. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of us aren't going to make as much money as we thought we were going to make, and that's just the reality, and we have to adjust and pivot and figure out where we need to make small changes to shift what our business is going to look like going forward. But we also need to think about our employees, because many of us don't have a business without our employees. And now is not the time to take your foot off the pedal when it comes to things like employee engagement and retention efforts, because we are going to go back to business and we are going to continue to do whatever it is we do, whether it's
Right.
a product or a service, and we're going to need people to help us do that. So now's the time to really appreciate and make sure that your employees, who are those key people, are productive, are engaged, and know that they're valued, so that when we get this thing turned around, those are the people that are, again, the superstars within your organization. You also want to think about training. You know, a lot of your employees didn't have the ability to fully convert their position to a remote working position. You don't want them to check out, because, again, we're all going to go back to work at some
Sure.
point. And so if you have the ability to train people, then now's a great time to do that. Doesn't have to be super expensive. There are lots of free and low cost options out there when it comes to training. But if you do have the funding available, it's a great time to invest in longer term training initiatives.
That's great. So those are all the things we all should be doing until the business reaches a point where it's a cliff, right? And I think a lot of our friends in the private sector, particularly in those tight margin businesses like small specialty retail or restaurant and food service, are approaching the cliff. And if this continues, heaven forbid, into May, they're going to go over the cliff. So let's talk for a few minutes, as uncomfortable, as terrifying and unsettling as it is to have those conversations, for the business owners who are the leaders of their brand out there. What's the right way to go about the stuff that you have to do that you pray you never have to? Because my intuition is, and just looking at our membership, I think we have a significant, measurable percentage of our small business infrastructure that may not be able to protect that workforce the way we wish we could, just because of the circumstances. So what's the right way to go about that? Because I know there is a right way.
Yeah, sadly, I've had a lot of conversations around that topic over the past several weeks, since many of the businesses had to close down because they were not listed as essential business functions. And so I've been talking with my clients, as well as some people who aren't clients but just know me through the chamber and through the community, who reached out and said, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know what to do. And it's not a conversation that you ever want to have. You know, no one sets out to go into business or to run a business and have to make the difficult decisions about laying people off or downsizing staff. But that's what we've had to do in a lot of instances to just keep the business solvent until we can start making revenue again. So, you know, my rule of thumb is always to treat people with as much respect and dignity as you can. And as a leader, sometimes your job is to communicate information that's really difficult. But now is the time to be transparent in your leadership and in your communication style, to let people know that you're absolutely doing the best that you can. And this is not a reflection of their performance or anything that they've done as an employee. It's simply a result of this crazy, terrible situation that we're all in. In the event that you do have to either furlough or lay off people or do some type of reduction in force, again, you know, prepare for that conversation. Your employees are going to have questions. Typically, the questions that I get asked when I'm conducting those types of meetings have to do with: when am I going to get my last paycheck? when are my benefits going to end? Or in the event of a furlough situation, are my benefits going to continue while this is going on? And what that looks like and the details around that. And am I eligible, and how do I apply for unemployment benefits? So if you can kind of do your homework as the business owner up front and be prepared to give your employees that information, most of it's online, it's easy to access, and I can certainly help folks if they're struggling with that. But have that information available, because that shows that even though this is a really terrible decision that you had to make, you're at least still helping them to facilitate what they need to do next.
Right. Well, and Shabri, in our session on the financial side of this, talked a little bit about how there are specific programs to protect your payroll. And there are, there was the EIDL $10,000. Initially, it was 10,000. Now I understand it's been dialed back to 1,000
Yes.
per employee.
Yes.
But still, there were those immediate care opportunities. Now, the sad thing is they're mostly oversubscribed and they're mostly underfunded. And those that aren't, still remains some confusion in the banking industry in terms of how to prosecute and execute these loans and stuff. But there are opportunities for those employers that feel that squeeze. Unemployment has been enhanced in a way I never imagined. In fact, I've heard some employers express concern that employees could be incentivized to remain on enhanced unemployment benefits just based on how it stacks up against payroll. My colleague Paul Fry in the Washington County Chamber, on a call with Senator Cardin, raised the question. You could tell it wasn't the question the senator wanted to answer.
Right.
Paul says, what do we do in those situations? Are we incentivizing people not to come back? But it certainly seems like the human value and compassionate thing to do. If you find yourself as a business owner at that point, take the extra step, go to DLLR and do the enrollment process as the employer, so that it's less burden on your workers if that's a path that they have to walk even temporarily. But so let's say we are able to go the happier route and we don't have to face layoffs or furloughs or terminations or downsizing. And we want to make those people that are working from their kitchen or from their spare bedroom feel connected to us and feel valued. There are some ways out there that we can kind of recognize and value the people that are struggling just like we are, just with a little bit different perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, this is a time where you do want to ensure that your employees still feel valued as an important member of the organization and of your staff as a whole. And I always say, never underestimate the power of a thank you. It's free, it takes 2 seconds, and it really goes a long way. So, reach out to your direct reports and just say, hey, I know this is a really weird time. We're all kind of muddling through and figuring this out by the seat of our pants, but I want you to know that I really appreciate, and be specific, talk about what they worked on or what they contributed. That goes a long way. And I've seen some really cool ideas come out during this time. I work with an organization that typically has a staff meeting, and after the staff meeting, as a part of it, they all have lunch together. And it's not anything extravagant. A lot of times it's pizza or subs or something like that. But they were still having this staff meeting, and the CEO arranged to have pizzas delivered to every staff member's house.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
what a cool idea.
Right. And obviously there's a cost associated with that. And I get it that times may be lean in a lot of organizations and that might not be feasible. But in this particular organization, it was. And it went a really long way. And, a lot of the staff members were taking pictures of themselves, a selfie with a slice of pizza, and, just talking about how much it meant to them. It was unexpected, and it helped them feel, I guess, a sense of normalcy, because that is something that's normally a part of their workplace culture. Other things that could incentivize folks or just make them feel valued: a lot of us aren't used to working at home, so we might not have the office supplies that we need. So what if you, grabbed a couple pens and a pack of Post-it notes and send it to their home address. Maybe that's not in the budget either, but could you afford a stamp? Could you just write a handwritten note to say thank you? Years ago, I worked for an IT company, and the COO on everyone's, I don't remember if it was their birthday or their anniversary with the company, but he would handwrite a note to every person in the company. When I started at the company, we had about 1,200 employees, and when I left, we had like 5,000. So that's
Wow.
an awful lot of notes to
Yeah,
handwrite.
that's a commitment.
It is, but everyone really valued that. And a lot of times being in HR, as we did exit interviews, when people were packing up their belongings to leave and go on to their next adventure, they would still have a stack of these cards. So don't underestimate the power of just a simple verbal thank you, but also a handwritten note. People hold on to that because we don't really get that many handwritten notes anymore.
Yeah. No, those are great suggestions. Earlier, so we're getting near the end of our time together, but early in the conversation, you said something that I think is the thing I want our viewers to take with them, and that is, as we all pivot, and all of us have to pivot in the current environment, and whatever happens once we're told that it's safe to return to the new normal, is to communicate the basis of that pivot. Why we're doing it, what we're going to do, how, as we do it, we take into account everybody's unique, fears and uncertainty. We've got some people just in our little team that aren't what I'd call technologists. So when I talk about how we're shifting away from person-to-person communication and B2B networking to use of online tools and conversations and chats like this, and new ways to communicate, it's really important to make sure that everybody on the team, taking into account all of our uniqueness and differences, is comfortable with that pivot. So that's a really powerful. So now I'm going to ask you a question that I didn't prepare you for.
I'm ready.
So you're the perfect person to answer this. So I've heard CEOs of small businesses. I've heard COOs of really large businesses. And I've heard just entrepreneurs who are starting companies say, I'm not sure that it makes sense for me to invest in dedicated HR resources, right? There's a lot of stuff written. There are a lot of FAQs out there. I think, so I want you in just a minute or two, talk about this myth, talk about why it isn't true, and then talk about how what you do fills that void so that we don't have business owners out there in a very complicated environment making terribly bad decisions simply because they didn't know that there are professionals out there that you can ask.
Yeah, I often joke that no one ever calls me because they're having a good day. So a lot of times I first engage with a client because they don't have a dedicated HR person, and now they have this tremendously large HR problem and no idea how to solve it. So, I'm happy to jump in crisis mode and get the business owner and get the organization through that. But my preference obviously is to take a more proactive approach to HR versus reactive. And so it is a myth because HR is an essential function of a business, whether you have one hire, 100 hires, 1,000 hires. Now, for the smaller businesses, which is the market that I typically serve, I work primarily with small businesses and startups. What I find is that some of the smaller companies, it's not cost effective to have a full-time in-house HR person. The metric is usually around the 50 employee mark where it makes sense to bring someone in-house. So until an organization gets to that size, they can work with me. And my company provides HR advisory services, so we're able to answer those compliance questions. We have a very good understanding of employment law and what the regulations are at the federal level as well as the state and local level for the business. We also can help advise on employee management and employee relations issues, as well as a whole host of other HR related functions. And then we provide training as well.
That's fantastic. Amanda, your expertise and your counsel has been a critical part of my own evolution as an organizational leader. And in times like these, having that trusted advisor that you can reach out to who can teach you the value of your own workforce, the personal and professional changes that a leader can make, and the processes and practices that should be put in place to ensure a productive workplace. Listen, that is literally invaluable, right? What you don't know will cost you dearly. So my admonition to all of my fellow CEOs out there, whether it's a small nonprofit like a chamber or a large life sciences employer in Frederick County, connect with that trusted advisor. You just can't go wrong. I want to really thank you personally and on behalf of all of our membership for your willingness to share your wisdom and most importantly, for your friendship. So thank you very much, Amanda. This was great.
Thanks, Rick. I really appreciate the time.
Stay safe and have a good day.
You too.